good to see you. Let me grab that acoustic.
No, you're gonna play the music, the stereo mix. So we're gonna use we wanna get Joe over at the road.
I just really feel strongly about pursuing your passions. We can all have careers, we can all have jobs, we can all do things to make our living, but at the end of the day, you can't lose yourself in that process. And nothing will ever replace the experience and the feeling that you get from being in a real recording studio and tracking with a bunch of band members and just getting into the groove and making magic. All my life I had said this is what I ultimately want to do, and I realized I was at a point where if I was going to do it, it was go big or go home. It seems like music has always been part of who I am. Starting to play guitar when I was a very young child, trying to pretend I was Glenn Campbell with my plastic guitar. I worked my way through college in my first recording studio, built it in my mother's basement, and never really gave it up, even when I was chasing my professional career. There was a creative vibe, something that just seemed to feel different for me in the studio environment. I seemed to be drawn to being on the other side of the glass and sitting at the board, and I love being around talented musicians and artists. So that was a way for me just to be part of that creative process. This studio, this project, was really inspired by the movie Sound City. I was on a plane and I just happened to come across this documentary, and it just absolutely blew me away. It was the vibe and the history that was being made in that studio, and the way that Dave Grohl told that story really inspired me. So I got off that airplane pretty much knowing that this was the direction I was going to go next.
Jimmy's interview, take one.
Okay. What is my full name? Jimmy Hoyson. Grew up in Greentree. I studied piano as I grew up, and guitar, and I still do that to this day. So I was juggling college and live mixing around town. And then through some of those bands, I got the opportunity to do a little recording studio work. And I really thought, like, this is what I really want to do. So from dabbling in the studios, reading the studio magazines, I was like, I got to go to New York or I got to go to Los Angeles. I knew one person in Los Angeles, and so I went out there literally with $100, a guitar, and a suitcase. And that was it. Luckily, I met someone that knew the people that owned the Village Recorder, my first recording studio. Engineering, you work at a recording studio, you learn through outside engineers that come to your studio to work, and you assist them. So I worked underneath the most famous engineers and producers to learn from, and then eventually in time, then I went freelance, and then I started to be the engineer, the main engineer. So I've really had a great opportunity to witness fantastic situations and settings. In 2015, my brother lost his battle with cancer. I just thought, well, I really need to be here. January 2016 was when I moved here. A longtime friend of mine, Scott Wilson, said, hey, you gotta come out and see this recording studio. I told Bob about you, he wants to meet you, why don't you come out and meet Bob? So I'm like, okay, I'll come out and meet Bob.
It was great to see Jimmy back in Pittsburgh. He's had an incredible career in LA, and his rap sheet is pretty extensive.
Rocky's band came in, we spent a day tracking, we recorded 4 songs, I think, and just for me to check out the room. And right away I said, Bob, you need these microphones. And he was like, immediately bought some the next day. So I'm starting to think, this guy's not bad. He is addressing these issues.
Jimmy helped me to see what was possible in terms of competing on a national or even an international scale.
And I said to him, Bob, you should buy a vintage Neve console.
He was also sort of stoking a little bit that inner voice that was telling me going all the way back to what inspired me to build this in the first place, that Neve. I mean, I think anybody who knows anything about vintage gear would love to have their hands on a desk like that.
Going back to the first studio I started at had a vintage Neve, an 8078. So I cut my teeth on a Neve. You get that vintage sound, that great big fat Neve sound with great microphones and great equipment. So he was open to it, so I contacted people that I know, Vintage King. Days later, I get this email and it has the big headlines, great news, great news. An 8058 had just come back on the market and it had already been refurbished.
We bought it from Scott Litt, who's a famous producer out in Los Angeles, and then basically brought it to Ferndale, Michigan. We decided on this particular project to pre-service it. We spent somewhere around 720 hours, somewhere in that range.
It's a rare desk, especially for its size and condition right now. And not many people get the chance to record on these, track an entire session through it. The EQs are famous, the preamps are famous. The 1073 preamp is probably the most famous preamp in the recording industry, and that's a Neve. And essentially you have 28 channels of that on this 8058 console.
If you think about what it takes to find a desk like this, it's configured the way you need it for your room, right? Not too big, not too small, sort of that Goldilocks desk. And then to find one and have it essentially already rebuilt. It happened a little faster than I expected, but it was the perfect desk.
They asked if we wanted to come up to Detroit and look at it, and so Bob and I made the 5-hour drive up there. Had the tour drooled all over the console and also all the equipment up there.
It was 2 kids in a candy store. Not just seeing several vintage Neve consoles, but to see all of the gear. Every one of those pieces of equipment was in a studio somewhere, was part of a project, or on records that you've heard growing up. A whole lot of names and a whole lot of projects and a whole lot of history that have been through this board. And that by itself is just intriguing, just to come in and see it and to touch it and to realize, how much history has been made on this thing is incredible. What it really comes down to is this has always been my passion, it's always been my dream. So to have the support to actually pursue that is incredible. Both my boys are musical. My youngest, Brett, started playing piano when he was 4. So he plays piano, saxophone, drums. And certainly I think Brett is continuing to pursue his music, and I think really wants to pursue it professionally. It's an incredible opportunity for him. Ryan was an incredible percussionist. He grew up loving his drums, was the drum captain for his high school marching band. He was a session drummer on a number of sessions here. He had his own band, he played here. He did a lot of his video work down here. So he loved being here, but he also loved working with other kids, other students. Unfortunately, Ryan passed in an automobile accident back in September of 2017. That was obviously very difficult for all of us. It was right in the middle of doing a lot of what we were doing. We had just started the label, just really started moving with the studio, and that was hard to re-energize. Brett is certainly inspired by Ryan and his drumming and his passion for music, and I think that drives Brett. It certainly drives me. We've set up a separate charitable fund with the Pittsburgh Foundation, the Rhythm 19 Fund for Ryan. And the purpose of that fund is to continue to support kids in pursuing their love of music, right? Whether that be children with special needs or at-risk youth, or just supporting music education in our schools. That's what was important to Ryan, teaching, working with kids, and ultimately pursuing his music. And so we're going to keep his memory alive through his music, through the vault, and through the fund.
Was already dead long ago when your eyes met mine. Later we realized this was more than just a fling. Something that's lasted longer than the
The concept of the vault was always more than the studio, right? The concept of the vault was a way to bring that community together, to support that community, to create opportunities that maybe don't currently exist in the city. So the studio obviously was at the center of it, but shortly thereafter we said, well, let's create the label, right? The label's the next logical step.
So dance with me.
The label is very artist-centric. It's very much around supporting those artists and trying to find ways to help them get to a place that they otherwise couldn't on their own. And so we signed, Chris right out of the gate, Jesse probably a week or so later. We've got another band, the Borstal Boys, that are coming up now next, and we've got a pipeline of probably half a dozen other artists. We'd love to do a recording school here as well. I think that's something that Jimmy and I both thought immediately could be a great opportunity. Again, using this space as a community builder and not just as a business, right? So, I think there are a lot of ways to not only use the charitable fund, but also through volunteering and actual activities on the ground here in the studio. And, I'd love to be able to provide those experiences for others. I believe in my heart there are just amazingly talented musicians in this city. I think we can create something here. That community, that vibe that you create in a space like a recording studio, it can't be duplicated anywhere. But also bringing people together and creating communities. And this is a way for me to put both of those together, to help create and strengthen community and bring people together through music.